Amy and I were married for 7 years. We met in college, the classic love story, or so I thought. We built a life together, a home, a future. We had our ups and downs like any couple, but I always believed we were in this together. Then, about a year ago, things started to change. Amy started working longer hours at her new job, a position she'd been ecstatic about. "It's demanding but rewarding," she'd say. I was genuinely happy for her, even if it meant less time together. But then the stories started. She'd mention work husband this, or work husband that. At first, I brushed it off, harmless workplace banter, right? I work in a male-dominated field, we all have work wives. But the way she said it, the little smirk she'd have when she recounted these interactions, it started to feel off. It started to feel wrong. She'd tell me about lunch dates with him, how he always made her laugh, how he just got her. I tried to join the conversations, ask her more about her day, show interest, but it was like she was talking about someone else. Not her partner of 7 years. It was always about him. I started to dread those conversations. They felt like a knife twisting in my gut every time. The worst part? Every time she talked about this work husband, she'd have this little smirk. It wasn't malicious, but it was smug. Like she had a secret, a little game she was playing, and I was just a pawn in it. Sleep became an ordeal. I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, the echo of that smirk bouncing around in my head. I started to feel like a complete idiot, like the fool who's always the last to know. I tried to talk to her, to tell her I felt like we were drifting. She brushed it off, saying I was being insecure, that I was making things up. "It's just work, Mike. You need to calm down." But I couldn't. So I did something I'm not proud of. Something I would never have imagined I'd do. I hired a private investigator. The report came in last week. It was brutal, a punch to the gut that left me reeling. It detailed lunch dates with this work husband, hand-holding, clandestine meetings in hotel parking lots. The photos, they were the most sickening. Amy, the woman I'd vowed to spend my life with, was all over this other guy. The smirk was gone from her face in the photos, replaced with an open, adoring smile that I hadn't seen in ages. It was like the woman I knew had disappeared. The work husband, who I now know to be called Jason, wasn't some harmless coworker. He was the embodiment of every fear I had. A slick, overly confident married guy with a reputation around the office. The PI also uncovered that Jason had cheated on his wife more than once with various coworkers. I'd spent the last week in a daze, trying to process this betrayal. I felt like I was living in a movie, one where the protagonist is betrayed by the person they love most. I was crushed, hurt, angry all at once. But mostly I was ready for revenge. Not the petty kind, the kind where you smash windows or key cars, but the kind that truly dismantles the house of cards someone builds their life on. Yesterday, it was all set into motion. I timed it so that Jason and Amy were both working late again. I called up the security company for their office complex, showed them the evidence I had, and pointed out the suspicious behavior. Jason sneaking Amy out to a car in the parking lot late at night. They were quick to agree that this was not typical and that it was a security risk. I gave them a copy of the PI's report and the evidence of the adulterous behavior. I asked them to keep their cameras on the lot that evening. They happily obliged. Next, I called Jason's wife. She had the same reaction I did, shock, then disbelief, then rage. We met up in a coffee shop and shared notes. We went through all of my evidence. Then we agreed that Jason's world was about to come crashing down. After she left, I drove over to Amy's office. I called her and told her I was at the front and to come out to see me. I had kept the PI's report from her. I had kept all of it from her. I wanted to see her reaction. She came out, that smug little smirk back on her face. It was like nothing was wrong, like we were living in our normal routine, as if her work husband wasn't waiting for her. I held up the pictures, the ones of them in the hotel parking lot. She went pale, her eyes widened, the smugness replaced with naked fear. She tried to deny it, to explain it away, but the pictures don't lie. "How could you?" I asked, my voice cold and even. "How could you do this to us?" "To me?" she stammered, tears starting to form in her eyes. "It's not what it looks like. We're just friends." I just shook my head. "I don't think so. Is that why you've been telling me how amazing he is? How he gets you? When I've been right here with you for the last 7 years. I don't know what to say. It's too late for that now, I stated, my voice low and full of menace. Then Jason came out of the building. He was in his usual slick suit, a smug look on his face, until he saw me and Amy, looking pale and terrified. "What's going on here?" he demanded. "This is Mike," Amy whispered, panic in her voice. I stepped forward, my eyes locked on Jason's. "Yeah, I am. I'm also the husband she's been lying to and sleeping with someone else behind my back. Your wife also knows. She's on her way here, and I can assure you, you do not want to be around when she arrives." His face paled, his bravado gone. He started to stammer excuses, his eyes darting around, looking for an escape. I just stared him down, the rage finally boiling over. I saw the security guard I had spoken to earlier nodding at me from behind his desk. That was my cue. I punched Jason square in the face. He went down like a sack of potatoes, his expensive suit getting wrinkled on the ground. He tried to scramble away, but I grabbed him by the collar, hauled him back up, and landed another punch, this time in his gut. He doubled over, gasping for air. I could see the fear in his eyes now, the realization that he wasn't untouchable. "You think you're so slick, don't you?" I growled, my voice low and dangerous. "Going around wrecking lives, thinking you can get away with it? You think you're some kind of player? You're nothing but a pathetic, cheating piece of garbage." I delivered another punch, this time to his jaw. He stumbled back, his nose bleeding, his lips split. I was no boxer, but the rage was fueling me. He was a mess. His tailored suit rumpled, his face a mask of pain and fear. I could have kept going, but I knew I had to stop. I needed to do this right. Just then, I saw a car pull up to the curb. Jason's wife, let's call her Emily, stepped out, her face a mask of controlled fury. She looked at the scene before her. Jason on the ground, bleeding and cowering. Amy standing there, a picture of guilt, and me breathing heavily. She didn't say a word. She walked straight up to Jason, kicked him in the ribs with a force that made him yelp, and then started yelling. I couldn't make out the words, but the sheer venom in her voice was palpable. She was unleashing years of anger, hurt, and betrayal. Amy, meanwhile, was trying to slink away, whimpering, tears streaming down her face. The smugness was gone. The game was over. The security guard stepped in at that point, separating Emily from Jason and guiding Amy back inside. Emily pulled out her phone, and I could see her typing furiously. I knew exactly what she was doing. Texting her lawyer, calling her family, contacting the HR department at her husband's company. I watched as Jason's world completely collapsed around him. I walked away. I didn't look back at Amy. I didn't look back at Jason. I didn't even look back at Emily. I had done what I needed to do. I walked away. I didn't look back at Amy. I didn't look back at Jason. I didn't even look back at Emily. I had done what I needed to do. The next few days were a blur. Divorce papers were filed. My lawyer made sure I would come away with everything I deserved. Amy tried to reach out at first, leaving messages, sending texts, even showing up at our house. But there was nothing left to say. She had made her choices, and now she had to live with them. I ignored every attempt, blocking her number, locking her out of my world for good. Through the grapevine, I heard Amy had been fired. Her boss found out about the affair through HR, and considering workplace policies, they had no choice. Her once promising career, the job she had sacrificed our marriage for, was now gone. She had always wanted to be the successful one in our relationship, but now she was back at square one. I don't know if she regretted it. I didn't care to find out. As for Jason, he was also fired. Emily followed through on her threats and made sure his reputation was in ruins. She had all the proof she needed to expose him not just to HR but to his industry contacts. Last I heard, he was struggling to find work. His arrogance had finally caught up with him, and he had no one to blame but himself. I know some people might say I should have just walked away, taken the high road, let karma do the work. But I won't lie, there was satisfaction in seeing them face real consequences. Seeing Amy's smirk shatter, Jason's confidence crumble. It was cathartic. I had spent too long feeling like a fool, like the last to know, and for once I had control over the narrative. That said, I don't regret the way I handled it. I don't regret making sure they faced the fallout of their choices. What I do regret, maybe, is how much I let it consume me. Because even after all of this, after the revenge, after cutting Amy out of my life, after knowing Jason had lost everything, I was still left with the hollow ache of betrayal. No amount of justice could change what had happened, couldn't undo the pain, couldn't erase the memories of the love I once believed was real. But I am healing, slowly, day by day. I've started therapy, focusing on myself, rebuilding. It's going to take time, but I refuse to let this define me. Amy and Jason may have destroyed our marriage, but they will not destroy me. This chapter of my life is closed, and for the first time in a long time, I'm looking forward to what comes next.